clearing away. And by the afternoon, a few showers just developing over the Midlands, parts of Wales, but they'll be pretty well scattered. Most places won't see them. Dry and bright, and temperatures around or a touch below average, generally getting into the mid to high teens. And temperatures dropping quite sharply, I suspect, on Saturday evening. If you are heading out, any showers tending to fade away, although we'll keep the risk of 1 or 2 coming in along these North Sea coasts. For most then, it's a fine, if fairly fresh start to Sunday. Quite a bit of sunshine for England and Wales. The sunshine turning increasingly hazy across Scotland and Northern Ireland, with a bit of patchy rain coming in here during the morning, and then some heavier rain coming into the far north by the end of the afternoon. For most, though, it stays dry and bright, and after that chilly start, temperatures again getting up into the mid to high teens. But not just turning wet in the far north, also fairly windy. A fairly active weather front swinging south, bringing a band of rain, but more importantly, introducing a northerly wind, which will bring all of us a chill on Monday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales
and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No extra duty on beer. Happy days. On Mark Dolan tonight in a mini budget special. Is today's budget reckless? Can Britain afford these tax cuts? Also, will Kwasi Kwarteng be a great Chancellor? We're going to find out more about his life and career. Just who is this guy? And with this budget being a tax-cutting bonanza, is Thatcherism back? And is that a good or a bad thing? We'll debate that with voices from across the political spectrum and my all-star panel. The budget is also the topic of my big opinion monologue. This is a budget that tells me Britain can and will bounce back. Let's go for growth, and if we get this right, the sky's the limit. My Mark Meets guest is TV legend Timmy Mallet. We'll be talking kids' television, being an unlikely celebrity, wacky glasses, and having a #1 record. Timmy Mallet tells his incredible story live on the show after 10. So in just 1 minute, it's the budget that believes in Britain. Find out more after the headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has hailed a new era for growth as he announced the largest series of tax cuts in half a century. As part of the government's mini-budget, Kwasi Kwarteng told the Commons he plans to abolish the 45% top rate of income tax for the highest earners. He also said he'll bring forward the planned basic rate reduction from 20 to 19 pence from April next year. The major spending package also includes cuts to stamp duty and the scrapping of the planned increase in corporation tax. The Chancellor says today's a good day for the UK.
We were facing a situation where the tax burden was at a 70-year high, and that was completely unacceptable. The Prime Minister campaigned for the leadership on the basis that we were going to reduce taxes, and that's exactly what we've done. The path we were on was simply unsustainable. We couldn't simply raise taxes indefinitely and hope that we would get prosperity. That's why this morning I reduced the tax burden across the piece, and I'm very, very committed to that.
Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the mini-budget is nothing new.
Can I thank the Chancellor on his comprehensive demolition of the record of the last 12 years. Their record, their failure, their vicious circle of stagnation. The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed.
To other news now. A second arrest has been made in connection with the murder of a teenager in West Yorkshire. 15-year-old Hiree McLean was fatally stabbed outside his school in Huddersfield on Wednesday. West Yorkshire police say a 15-year-old boy has been arrested in connection with the death. Yesterday, a 16-year-old was arrested on suspicion of murder. Both remain in custody. Russian-backed officials in 4 occupied regions of Ukraine are holding self-styled referendums on joining Russia. The so-called votes are taking place over the next 5 days in 4 regions across the south and east of the country, which represent around 15% of Ukrainian territory. The referendums have been denounced as illegitimate by Ukraine and the West. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Many thanks to the brilliant Tamsin Roberts, who returns in an hour. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight and our budget special. In the big question, is today's budget reckless? Also on the show, who is Kwasi Kwarteng? He's an economic historian. He went to Eton. He's been on University Challenge, swearing. But just who is this guy, and will he be a great chancellor? We've got the inside track on this talented and exciting new politician. And does today's budget, which involves a bonanza of tax cuts, suggest that Thatcherism is back? And if so, is that a good or a bad thing? We'll debate those issues with the voices from across the political spectrum and my all-star panel. Tonight, tackling the big stories of the day are broadcaster and showbiz queen Lizzie Cundy, financial analyst and political commentator Albie Amankona, and best-selling author and agony aunt Hilary Freeman. And my Mark Meets guest is TV legend Timmy Mallet. We'll be talking about kids' TV, being an unlikely celebrity, wacky glasses, and having a #1 record. Timmy Mallet tells his incredible story live on the show after 10. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. mark@gbnews.uk, your opinions are my priority. And this show has a golden rule: we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. What's the world coming to? A Conservative government that cuts taxes, stimulates the economy and encourages businesses to grow. A government that says yes to fracking so we can be less impacted by the global cost of energy. A government that's using the tax system to incentivise home ownership, particularly for first-time buyers. A government which reverses an increase in national insurance, which is a tax on jobs. And one which cuts a planned rise in corporation tax, which is a tax on investments. A government which ends caps on bonus payments for high flyers so that successful people are encouraged to come to the UK, stay here and pay their taxes in Britain. For the first time in decades, we've actually got a Conservative government. Be still, my beating heart. Let's be clear, this budget is one hell of a gamble. We're effectively borrowing billions to bring down inflation, which will be the consequence of support for energy bills. And we're borrowing more billions to reduce the tax burden on hard-working Brits and businesses. The Institute for Fiscal Studies are deeply uncomfortable with this policy, and their chief, Paul Johnson, has said the following. He said today the Chancellor announced the biggest package of tax cuts in 50 years, without even a semblance of an effort to make the public finance numbers add up. Instead, the plan seems to be to borrow large sums at increasingly expensive rates, put government debt on an unsustainable rising path, and hope that we get better growth. This marks such a dramatic change in the direction of economic policy making that some of the longer-serving cabinet ministers might be worried about getting whiplash. Ouch. And I'll be honest, the markets and international speculators are not loving this budget. However, we've learnt a bit, haven't we, about experts over the last couple of years. As with the junk modelling that we saw during the pandemic and the disastrous policies of lockdown as recommended by mainstream scientific experts, so mainstream financial experts have also had a recent habit of being wrong. It was financial experts who predicted Armageddon after Brexit. Remember that? They spoke of a run on the pound, a recession, a flight of capital, sky-high interest rates, a brain drain, and a housing market crash. Didn't happen. And the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, seriously underestimated the threat of inflation almost 2 years ago. He could have raised rates early to get on top of prices, but he failed to act. Experts, eh? And now the doom and gloom financial experts think that this government's dash for growth is a race to the bottom. So Liz Truss and her impressive new Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng have shown today enormous political and economic courage. The message is that they believe in Britain. They believe in our businesses and they believe in our incredible people, the millions who go out to work every day and contribute to the unstoppable juggernaut that is the British economy. The mainstream experts squeal about the extra borrowing. But what are we talking about here? 40 or 50 billion quid to put a tiger in the tank and fire up the engines of the British economy, to create economic growth with which to pay for the public services upon which we all rely. Where were these financial experts when we were borrowing £500 billion in what is now becoming clear was a failed attempt to stop a seasonal respiratory virus? £500 billion to pay healthy people to stay at home and to close once viable businesses for a potentially nasty virus, yes, but one with a largely vanishing threat to human life. One of the top medics in the world, the highly respected infectious disease Professor Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford University in California, has called lockdowns the biggest public health mistake in history. Well, lockdowns were the worst investment in history too. 34 billion quid wasted on a test and trace scheme that was never going to stop a bug like this one, and the billions wasted on PPE, Nightingale hospitals, and the billions lost on dodgy bounce-back loans and other handouts that will never be repaid. Plenty of establishment broadcasters today are up in arms about the borrowing. They're so worried. Except that all of the main channels, and you know who I'm talking about, were the biggest cheerleaders of the ruinous COVID measures just a few short months ago. Some of us pointed out the appalling and needless economic damage that was happening at the time, but we were the bad people, remember? I cautiously approve this budget because it's a rejection of the institutional pessimism that is now rooted within this country. We've become addicted to bad news and have indulged in the narrative that Britain is a basket case, or, as a national radio presenter recently said, close to being a failed state. Failed state? Do me a favour. Talking Britain down has become a pastime among the metropolitan elite. It will never happen on my watch. We now have a bold Prime Minister and a bold Chancellor that actually believe in this country and want to see it prosper. I wish them well. We all need them to succeed. If they're wrong, they will lose the next election. Fair enough. The greatest casualty of this budget is the creeping socialism which has turned us into a big spending, high taxation, low growth economy, which is crap for everyone, particularly for the poorest in our society. Don't forget, it was the drastic reduction in tax in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher and her incredible Chancellor, Nigel Lawson, that led to an economic boom and the extension of financial opportunity to everyone in our society. The top rate of tax was reduced from, wait for it, 83% in 1979 to 40% by 88. And the basic rate of income tax went from 33% to, again, 25% in 1988. What happened when they cut taxes? The economy skyrocketed. In the 80s, working class people started businesses, enjoyed an unprecedented disposable income, and were able to buy the council houses and flats in which they lived. And of course, unemployment was eradicated. The 80s were a decade of aspiration in which we grew Britain into what it will become today. Because for all of our current challenges, we are still the 5th biggest economy in the world, with the lowest unemployment in the G7, and we still enjoy an enviable rate at which to borrow. This government are right to go for growth, because a healthy, growing economy benefits everyone. A high national income allows us to have the great health service, the great police force, the great defence, the great schools, and the great welfare support that we value so highly. And to be fair to New Labour, they understood that too. They kept taxes low and supported big earners in the late 90s and 2000s to increase their wealth. Why? Because it was in the national interest. They made their money, they spent their cash here, they paid their taxes. Tony Blair, for his sins, was aspirational too. And what happened? A decade of sustained growth. I do hope you'll forgive me for being nice about Tony Blair. I won't make a habit of it. Look, folks, we've got to wean ourselves off the crack cocaine of tax and spend, an addiction to which both Labour and more recently Tory governments have been guilty. This country's got lots of problems, we all know that. But by rolling the dice and taking a punt on the enterprise of the British people and putting money back in their pocket and attracting filthy rich people to live and spend their money and taxes here, Prime Minister Liz Truss and Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng have made it abundantly clear what their focus will be over the next 2 years. It's the economy, stupid. This mini-budget was big on ideas, and it's my prediction it will set Britain on a path to recovery, tapping into the opportunities that Brexit has to offer, and it may just seal the deal for Liz Truss at the next election. Even beer and wine will be spared the taxman's avaricious clutches. So let's hope this gamble pays off. Here's to growth, folks. I'll drink to that. Full disclosure, it's not beer. It's apple cider vinegar and water, but I don't want to be one of those fake, fraudulent TV presenters. What you see is what you get on Mark Dolan tonight. It's a BS-free zone. Now, let's get a reaction to my big opinion monologue. Most importantly, what do you think? It's mark at gbnews.uk. Tell me whether you love or hate today's mini-budget. Let's get the views now of my wonderful panel. Very delighted to welcome one of my oldest friends, broadcaster and showbiz queen Lizzie Cundy, actress, entrepreneur, reality star, model, you name it. That was just this morning. We've also got financial analyst and top political commentator, a very old friend of the show, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism. It's Albi Amankona. And another pal. It is the best-selling author and agony aunt. My God, we could do with her help at the moment, couldn't we? It's the wonderful Hilary Freeman. Hilary, let me start with you. Are you loving this budget?
No. I think it's a really, it's not going to help the people that need to be helped in this country, the people that write to me as an agony aunt. People are in masses of trouble financially. They can't afford to live. And it's the people at the lowest incomes who are not going to be helped by this budget at all. You describe me as a best-selling author. Unfortunately, that was a very kind exaggeration. I'm somebody who is not, a top earner, and I'm not going to be helped by this budget at all. And it's going to just create more and more rich people and more poor people, and a polarised society even more than it is already. And I think it's a really bad budget that's just for the rich.
Do you not take my point that taxes, including the higher rate of tax, remained low under Labour for a decade? And I think it's fair to say, notwithstanding the challenges of the Iraq War and other issues, the tax burden was low under New Labour, and the economy grew quite steadily before the credit crunch.
It was a very different world then, and you only have to look at what Gordon Brown's been saying today. You know, he is not happy with this budget, and I have to say, you know, you approved of Blair's years and what he did for the economy, and that was largely down to his Chancellor Gordon Brown. And Gordon Brown thinks that this is, you know, a disastrous budget for the people that need to be helped in this country.
But Hillary, he's changed his tune. This guy, when he was Chancellor, Gordon Brown, was the toast of the City of London.
Well, like I said, you know, the world has changed, and we are not in the same situation as we were in the 90s, and that calls for different policies.
Do you not think, though, do you not take my point? I'll come to Albie and Lizzie in just a moment, but if we have more national income, which is what growth is all about, then it means you haven't got to borrow to give nurses pay rises. You haven't got to borrow to build new schools or to employ more police officers.
Yeah, but where's this money coming from?
Growth. You borrow money to cut taxes, which causes businesses to invest and hire people, and there's more money in the pockets of the public who can go shopping.
But it's not. The people who need the money are not going to be. They're not going to be having the tax cuts, are they? And there's already a massive massive problem with, you know, jobs going that people aren't filling because those jobs are paid so poorly. So what you need to do is actually just increase wages, and then people will, you know, won't mind paying more taxes.
Well, Albie, I think a lot of what Hillary has said will resonate. I think that the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, will be salivating at some of the potential headlines, particularly scrapping a cap on bankers' bonuses. And it was clear from the Institute for Fiscal Studies earlier today, Paul Johnson pointed out that if you're earning over £150,000, you're going to do disproportionately well. Not a great look for the Tories.
What this Conservative government is going for is they're going for growth, as you said in your monologue. And I think this budget, this mini-budget, not very many, I wouldn't say, has to be welcomed with cautious optimism. Look, what we've had over the last 12 years since the financial crash in 2008 is a stagnant economy. We have had supply issues, whether or not that is with labour, whether or not that is with energy, whether or not that is with goods. And what this government is all about doing is trying to change those facts to get the economy growing again. Now, just to unpack some of the problems that Hillary had with this budget. So this budget is to grow the economy. What is helping people in the lowest incomes the most is, of course, the energy support package, which was announced earlier on this week, which is, in fact, a much broader and a more far-ranging policy idea than the Liberal Democrats or indeed the Labour Party came up with earlier on this year. So that is what is being put in place by this government to help people paying their energy bills. What's going on with the budget is to help the economy grow. And I think the concerns come from the fact that actually a lot of the leadership contest was talking about a slimmer state. This isn't really a slimmer state. And I agree with some of the problems that Paul Johnson had to say about this from the IFS, which is actually this is a huge programme of increase in public spending. We're talking hundreds of billions being spent on tax cuts, yes, but also on the energy support for people. And where is that money coming from? Like, we're going to have to wait until the OBR forecasts come out before we can cast a judgment on that.
Albie, have the Tories not missed a trick, at least introducing a new windfall tax on energy firms?
So this is an interesting point, because, of course, one of the things that Margaret Thatcher did in 1981 was put a windfall tax on oil and gas companies and also banks who are making a lot of money because of high inflation. So I think the argument that putting windfall taxes on companies that are earning excess profit isn't Conservative is a bit tricky, especially when Mrs Thatcher did it, and that's what allegedly Liz Truss is basing her budget on. But what her argument would be is that she believes that businesses who are investing in Britain should be able to trust the tax rates which are set and not have unexpected taxation come up at various points in the year because the government decides a company is earning too much money. And I think if you were an investor, if you ran a business in the United Kingdom, you might be a little bit concerned about that. But I really can see both sides of the windfall tax argument.
Well, I think you raised a good point. I think that what this new government, and it really feels like a new government, does it, Albie, are saying is if you invest in this country, there won't be any surprise emergency taxes, as you say, because you've had a good year.
Precisely, that is the point, Mark. They're trying to make the United Kingdom a more attractive place to invest in. The question is will this gamble play off? Because to get 2.5% growth from basically no growth, which is where we are now, in the 2 years before the general election, it's going to be very tricky. And I don't think the government had necessarily been completely honest about that.
Lizzie Cundy, you've got a big following on Twitter and you've been tweeting about the budget today, and it sounds like it's a yes from you.
Well, it's a definite yes from me. There's nothing mini about it. It's a mega budget, and our new Chancellor, pulled more rabbits out of the hat than Paul Daniels at a Christmas party. It was incredible. And, to give Liz Truss her word, she did everything she said. Well, she said she was going to go big. She went big. She said she was going to be bold. She was bold. Yeah. And I think this is what this country needs. We needed to slash the tax and we need to stimulate the economy. We need people back out there. We really do, Mark. And I think it's an incredible budget today, and I was very, very happy. The Tories are back. I feel like we've got Margaret Thatcher back and Nigel Lawson. I really do. And I think it is really going to change things. It's going to really make people have more money in their pocket. It's changing the culture. It's going to make people want to go back to work, appreciate work, and we're keeping more what we earn in our pockets, and then we can spend more and stimulate the economy.
Well, yes, and I'm really glad you mentioned Thatcher. We'll be debating her later, Lizzie, in the programme. Is Thatcherism back, and is that a good or a bad thing? It is, though, Lizzie, I think you'll agree, a gamble. You're an entrepreneur, and you know that you've got to speculate to accumulate. It is a roll of the dice. I think we can agree on that. If it backfires, if the international bond markets lose confidence in the United Kingdom as a safe investment, if inflation skyrockets, then the Tories are toast at the next election, aren't they? This is a make-or-break budget.
Yeah, it's a gamble, Mark, without a doubt. It's an economic gamble. It's a government gamble. Don't forget, we've got an election in 2 years' time. They need to make this work. If they don't, all of those lefties will be saying, oh, this is, all for the city boys and, looking after themselves. We have to make this work. But we needed a radical change. And this is what Liz Truss has done. And I think the whole world will be watching. I mean, maybe not, Biden, because he doesn't know what day it is. But I really do think the whole world will be watching this and seeing we had to change because we were stagnating. And we need to stimulate the economy, as I said, and make people have more money in their pockets. That's what it's about. So then they can go out. We can spend more at the restaurants, go to the cinemas. Look at Cineworld is closed down. We need to, get back out there and spend. And we will be able to do that because, as I said, we'll have more money in our pockets.
Well, there you go. 65% of the economy is based on consumption. So there is some logic to these tax cuts. But my panel don't agree about this. And that's the point of this show. It's all about opinions. So what is yours? Mark at gbnews.uk. Is it a win or a fail, today's mini budget? In the big question, we're going to have two top experts who are slugging it out. And we'll simply be asking, is today's budget reckless? Also, later in the show, who is Kwasi Kwarteng, a new Chancellor? We'll speak to a man who's been researching him at length. The guy went to Eton. Of course, he's a very talented black man. He's a doctor. He went to Oxbridge. He's obviously a bit of a genius, but is he a good economist and will he be a great Chancellor? We'll discuss Kwasi Kwarteng shortly. Is Thatcherism back? The papers at 10:30, and also after 10, TV legend Timmy Mallet. We don't mess around. I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, a big reaction to my big opinion monologue. I'm calling it a bold budget. Yes, it's a gamble, but it's a budget that believes in Britain, believes in Britain's businesses and the hard-working people that go out to work every day and put in a shift. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Opinion divided, let me tell you. First of all, we've got this from Rick. Mark, fantastic budget. Radical change was massively overdue. Well done, Liz. However, Chris says Truss is a wannabe Thatcher. She's a very dangerous and deceitful woman. Thinks she has to be harder than a man to prove she can do the job rather than just doing the job. Fair chance that her rhetoric will cause the end of the world as we know it. Very pessimistic view from Chris there. If the world does end, you'll get live coverage here on GB News. I'll stay on air, obviously. How about this from Andy? Liz Truss hasn't delivered everything she promised. She promised to cut fuel duty, and she has not. And strong words now from Julie. Hi, Julie. Thanks for your email. No one gets censored on my show. Julie says, today's shit budget. How stupid are you townies? There is more people living in the country, not just bloody London. I'm on a widow's pension of £9,000 a year. I don't pay tax or national insurance because I do not earn enough. I'm also disabled. I get an extra £122 a week. When will you rich so-and-sos work it out? We are poor and struggling. Look, there you go. That is a very, very strong view from Julie, who feels that this budget has let her down. And looking at the figures that she's quoted, hard to disagree. But the question is, will the idea of boosting economic growth help everyone? Does it help Julie as well as the rich or not? Keep those opinions coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. Time now for this. Yes, it's time for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Tonight, following the mini-budget in which Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled a package of tax cuts worth £45 billion. Is the budget reckless? Could it cause a crash in the value of the pound? I mean, it's not looking great at the moment, is it? And could it finish off an economy still recovering from the pandemic? And is it fair to saddle future generations with yet more borrowing? First, though, let's have a listen to the man himself. Summing up his budget, here's Kwasi Kwarteng.
Plan, Mr. Speaker, is to expand the supply side of the economy through tax incentives and reform. That is how we will deliver higher wages, greater opportunities, and crucially, Mr. Speaker, fund public services now and into the future. That is how we will compete successfully with dynamic economies around the world. And that is how, Mr. Speaker, we will turn this vicious cycle of stagnation into a virtuous cycle of growth.
Well, is this the right approach to the future of our economy? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome economic heavyweight Christopher Snowdon from the IEA and financial wizard Jonathan Davis, who is the star of the Booms and Bust podcast. Look, I'm going to have a word with Christopher in a moment, but let me go straight to you first, Jonathan, if I can, because you were on my radio show 2 years ago at the in the kind of, I suppose, the early stages of the pandemic. And you told me on that show, it was a very doom-laden conversation, and you said inflation is coming. You're the only economist I spoke to over the period of those few months that mentioned inflation. You've been proved right.
In November of 2020, right at the end of that year, inflation was still under 1%. It's now 11%. And it's not because...
Is that the official figure, by the way?
RPI, 11% RPI.
Fine.
And it's not because of the nonsense, but the war 2,000 miles to the east. It's because of what all the politicians have done for the last 25 years. They have destroyed the pound. They have gone for the green nonsense. So oil and gas companies have not been able to find and produce oil and gas. Expensive renewables, inefficient. So when we came out of the lockup, I don't call it lockdown, it was imprisonment. When we came out of lockup and demand soared and there wasn't the energy to go around, that's the reason why prices for energy have soared. Yeah. And hence, in a year and a half, 2 years, inflation has gone through the roof. Now,
do you think, briefly, in the absence of Putin's invasion of Ukraine, do you think inflation would still be very high?
Of course it would be. The price of oil was $20 a barrel on the world stage in April, May of 2020. Before the Ukraine thing, it had already topped $100 in less than 2 years. So, that was just the icing on the cake. It had already been soaring. And as I say, it's 25 years of mismanagement, of maladministration by all the politicians, not this side or that side. And basically, I've been saying for years that eventually the chickens would come home to roost. The chickens are now clocking. Why? Because, for example, we've still got over $2,000 billion of debt, pounds of debt. That's the government alone, never mind household and corporate. But a year and a half ago, the interest rate on that was less than 1%. Now it's 3.5%. That's an enormous increase that taxpayers today and in the future are going to have to stump up. And unfortunately, this so-called mini-budget is red herring as far as I'm concerned. It doesn't even remotely get to the fundamental problems in our economy. All it does is focus on the general election, which, funnily enough, is what every politician does, every government does 2 years before a general election.
So what would you say? Energy independence and stop printing money. Would that be a place to start?
We could easily have had energy independence. I know that she's talking about fracking and getting the gas out the ground, which we desperately need to do. I know they're talking about licences in the North Sea. I know they're talking about new nuclear plants. None of it's going to be there for at least 2030. So it's not going to help the cost of energy for many, many years. And printing money, there's an idea, there's a myth that the Bank of England, that the central bank or the Federal Reserve in the US or the European Central Bank and Uncle Tom Cobley, they can control inflation by raising interest rates, for example. Well, let me give you an example. Argentina has got 70% interest rates and 70% inflation. No, it's not about central banks, it's about politicians and governments. They are massively overspending. The fiscal stimulus in 2020 and 21, literally handing money in businesses to do nothing. Well, of course, that's what creates huge inflation, and that's where we are. There needs to be a slashing of government spending, not austerity, which George Osborne didn't actually do, by the way, although he talked about it every day that he was Chancellor.
He bottled a lot of it, didn't he?
Bottled. He was never going to do it in the first place. We need a slashing of government spending. We need a slashing of regulations and of quangos. There's far too much public sector civil servant nonsense in the UK.
Let's speak to another good friend of the show. Do stay with us, Jonathan, because I'm delighted to welcome Christopher Snowdon from the IEA. And Christopher, your organisation, a highly respected economic think tank, has given this budget the thumbs up.
Well, broadly speaking, and we all have different views, I'm basically in favour of it. What I've just heard from Jonathan actually is music to my ears. The IEA were warning inflation in June 2020, precisely because of the amount of money printing. And there's been a lot of stupid objections to the budget I've heard today, but one of the legitimate ones is that it may further fuel inflation. And one of the most important things right now is to get inflation down. Well, probably the second most important thing is to get the deficit down. But looking in the bigger picture is we've been in a slump for a very, very long time. And I mean, Hillary, who had on before, kind of epitomised the problem, which is that she looks at the budget and says, well, what's this going to do for people in the bottom quintile? So budgets aren't there for that. Not every policy is about making sure that you're handing out money to people in various different parts of the income distribution. We have a welfare state for that. The energy price cap is massively redistributing money. Some policy should be based around generating economic growth. Not everything in this budget, I think, will do that. And in fact, everything in this budget taken together will not really be enough necessarily even to avoid inflation, let alone economic growth. But there is some good stuff in there. There was the idea we should be raising corporation tax was ridiculous. Stamp duty needs cutting. It really hinders growth apart from anything else because people can't move. It reduces the number of household purchases. You'll probably get more revenue actually if you do cut it. The national insurance rise probably shouldn't have happened. It's not a good idea to be taking money out of people's pockets. On the other hand, I think the 45p income tax cut could have probably waited for another day. That's taken all the headlines. I think it's really bad politics to be announcing that. It's only £2 billion. It's not going to make much difference either way. It's possible we might get people pouring over the Scottish border to take advantage of that rate, which would be quite funny. But the optics obviously are not great on that. The 1p off, most people's income tax, kind of a good thing here or there, but don't forget, people's energy bills are at least doubling this winter, even with the price cap. So taking a penny off income tax is not going to necessarily forestall a recession. So I am in favour. The principle behind it is great. It's great that we're having a change in direction. The old way of doing things was not working, and the dash for growth is the only thing that can save us. It's our only way out of the woods is economic growth, but it's going to require a lot more than a penny off income tax. We need to see now a lot of deregulation and dealing with the fundamental problems rather than accepting that we have problems like a housing crisis, like very expensive childcare, and this borrowing money and giving it to people so they can afford these inflated prices. That's been the problem for a very long time.
Christopher, the support for people's energy bills and businesses is expected to cut inflation in half to about 5%. And then it's been speculated, and it's certainly my view, that we will have a shallower and shorter recession thanks to these tax cuts. But what about the currency traders, the international bond markets? What about Britain's credibility? Are we playing with fire with this level of borrowing?
I think the markets will come round. I mean, people have been talking about it being a 45 billion tax cut. It's not. 19 billion of that is not raising corporation tax. It's not a cut if you haven't raised it to begin with. So we're still looking at significant amounts of money, 20 billion this year, 25 billion probably next year. If you assume there are no dynamic effects, if you assume that these things don't actually work, they don't do what they're supposed to do, they don't generate growth, which they will, it's a significant sum of money. But if you look over the course of the last 14 years, what we've been borrowing every year, it's not actually that much. And I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm very keen on getting the deficit down, but I do take the argument. I understand, I think, where Liz Truss and Kwasi are coming from on this, which is, we all want to balance the books. But we took a big wrong turn a long time ago with the British economy. We became addicted to low interest rates and money printing and borrowing. And ironically, we might need to do a bit of borrowing for a couple of years while we turn this tanker around.
Okay, so
because
look,
people won't accept public spending cuts. That's the politics.
Yeah.
People won't accept austerity. So what can you do? The only thing you can do, if you want to bring down taxes, which you need to if you're going to turn the economy around, is borrow to make up for that in the short term.
So, Jonathan, look, it's always very informative when we have you on the show. In fact, I've had a flood of emails. They're loving Christopher, but some of them are loving you as well. Jackie says, "Hi, Mark, where did you get this amazing guy, Jonathan, from? Finally, someone talking sense and telling it like it is." However, your message is not a positive one, is it, Jonathan? I mean, I think your overview is that we are moving deck chairs around the Titanic. What is the outlook for the British economy in the medium term?
First of all, it's a global thing that we're in recession. It's going to be huge. I think it's going to be as big as the 2000 to 2003 recession and stock market collapse. In the medium to long term, in fact, well, what we've had for decades is several years of upswing, then 1 or 2 years of recession, and that's repeated for the last 40 odd years.
And anemic growth.
Well, in the long term, which has been helped, in a sense, the other way, because of people borrowing more. So they had more cash to buy stuff. I think that the cycle of boom and bust is going to be much reduced from now on. We've just had 2 years of boom. I think we're now going to have 1 or 2 years of bust. Then we'll have, because they'll stimulate again, they'll fiscally stimulate, they'll hand money left, right and centre to people, to businesses, basically to do nothing. They'll bail everyone out again, and we'll get another couple of years of growth, or 3 years, and then there'll be another bust. So the cycles over the next 10 to 20 years, I'm forecasting, will be much shorter. Boom, bust, ultimately no net growth into the 2030s.
And this would be the UK and Western Europe, I would have thought.
Indeed.
USA?
Probably the US, because they're basically doing the same as we are. They're stimulating like crazy, and of course, cost of borrowing is raising there as well.
Christopher, a gloomy outlook. Are you as pessimistic?
No, it's unusual for me not to be the most pessimistic on a show like this. No, I'm assuming here that Truss and Kwasi will follow through with the rest of their programme. This is only the first chapter of their growth programme, because as I say, this stuff today alone will not be sufficient. There needs to be serious reform of various forms of regulation. We need to be following through on getting more energy, fracking, all the rest of these things to get the economy going, and making this a place where people want to set up a business, where they want to expand the business, and where businesses from abroad want to move here. And I think they've made a pretty good start to that today. Assuming they do that, I agree with Jonathan. If we didn't do any of this, he's basically right. We would just carry on in this slump indefinitely. So would USA, so would Europe. But I think the most optimistic possibility, which I do think is perfectly plausible, is that this time next year, inflation is down to 3, 4, 5%. Interest rates around about 3 or 4%. We've just about avoided a recession because of the energy price cap. We may even have growth of probably not 2.5%, but possibly 1.5%, and it's onwards and upwards from there. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen. It's probably the best case scenario, but if that is a position in a year's time, I think we should all be very happy with that.
A few seconds. Last word to you, Jonathan Davis.
Inflation is coming down because we're entering recession. It's nothing to do with what the Bank of England is doing. And funnily enough, I walked past the governor of the Bank of England in Threadneedle Street today, coincidentally.
Did you? Did you give him a dirty look? Did you throw him some daggers?
Best not go there. This is the family show. So inflation's coming down. You're quite right. But unemployment's going to rise, house prices are going to fall. These clearly are negatives for the economy. And as I say, it's not a lot to do with what little UK government or Bank of England does. It's the global economy.
Well, look, Jonathan Davis is a top financial planner and advisor. He's the star and creator of the Booms and Bust podcast. Check him out online, Jonathan Davis, Davis, and another good friend of mine, economic heavyweight, it says on the script by Tom. He's absolutely right. From the Institute of Economic Affairs, from the luxury of his well-appointed home and that rather posh armchair of his, Christopher Snowdon. Chris, thanks so much for joining us as well. Lots of emails coming in, but what do you think? GB Views? No, let's go for Mark. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's my show tonight, isn't it? Mark at gbnews.uk. Let me know your thoughts. Is this particular budget reckless? OK, we'll look lots more to come. After this, who is the new Chancellor? We're going to do a deep dive and learn a bit more about Kwasi Kwarteng, where he went to school. This guy was on University Challenge. He's a doctor. He went to Oxbridge. He's a bit of a genius, but we'll find out more. Is he going to be a great Chancellor? We'll speak to a man who's read up on his life and career. And just after 10, we've got another monologue. It's my take at 10. And it's about free speech, which is, I'm afraid, under threat in this country. Find out more after 10. Also after 10, TV legend Timmy Mallet, plus the papers at 10:30. We are chock full. I'll see you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio.
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
David is not happy with today's budget. I thought this mini budget was supposed to help the majority of the population in need of a crisis, which is happening now. All I've seen is tax cuts, which won't happen until April next year. And to be honest, it will only benefit those who earn over 150 grand. The Prime Minister campaigned big on cutting the green levy tax and nothing has been done. VAT should have been cut to 15%. Those two would have helped the most needy at this time. But all I see is the richer people benefiting. I agree in the long term the strategy might work, but the majority of the country need help now from a disappointed member. Well, there you go. That's from David. The halo appears to have slipped for Liz Truss. Well, let's see if this gamble pays off. The growth plan, outlined by the Chancellor, has been met with a mixed reaction in the Commons. Uncertainty, too, in the financial market, with the pound ending at its lowest against the dollar for nearly 4 decades. And with the cost of living crisis crippling the nation, Kwarteng is arguably the biggest job in Britain at the moment. But what do we know about our brand new Chancellor and his rise to number 11? Joining me to discuss the inner workings of our new Chancellor is the host of Lotus Eaters, a brilliant talk show online, and a great friend of Mark Dolan tonight, regular panellist, Connor Tomlinson. Hi, Connor.
Good to see you in again, Mark. It's been far too long.
Look, it's great to have you on the programme. Welcome back. Kwasi Kwarteng, first of all, what do we know about his family background?
Well, he's the son of Ghanaian immigrants, and he's done incredibly well for himself, considering he got a scholarship for Eton College when he went to a London prep school. And then while he was at the college, he showed such academic prowess.
What does a scholarship mean?
As in, I believe he got his entire tuition paid, which would be quite nice.
Right.
Wouldn't it?
So this lad was so bright, he went to Eton for free.
Seems so, yeah. And then
Wow.
when he was at Eton, he actually was the highest performer in a series of exams, and so he won the Newcastle Scholarship, and then got 2 Brown medals for Latin and Greek poetry, which he then went on to study at Cambridge for his undergraduate at Trinity College. So fairly well-accomplished academic tenure there, even at an early age. Then he went to Harvard for his master's, and then he went back to Cambridge to get a PhD in economic history in 2000. And it shows actually quite an interesting split from most of the modern economists that you see in the halls of power, the likes of Janet Yellen or, of course, Liz Truss's primary opponent, Rishi Sunak, because Kwarteng seems to be a bit more of a Chicago school economist, which means a bit more of a free marketeer, more up your previous guest's street than what we would call a modern monetary theorist, which is the belief that you would control inflation by taxing money out of the money supply because you've printed too much money. It's the belief the government's in charge of the economy. Whereas Kwarteng seems to think, well, if the government just sets up new investment zones, for example, to stop taxing businesses so much, then we might get enough growth to ensure that all of the ships in Britain benefit from the rising tide.
He's clearly clever, highly educated, and that doctorate in economic history will doubtless help him at number 11.
I would hope so. I mean, I'll be frank, his budget today came across as very authoritative, and despite Rachel Reeves' barbed quips, the content of her rhetorical devices employed were a bit empty, especially when she comes to the windfall tax, because when it comes around to that, yes, it was a Labour policy, yes, Rishi Sunak adopted it, but it was going to cripple investment into the long term. So short-term fix for something that's been brewing in the pipeline for decades, because successive governments, Tory and Labour alike, have failed to invest in energy. And I can actually have a personal story here. Kwasi Kwarteng and the then Energy Minister Greg Hands, they read my paper for the Adam Smith Institute back in 2021 that told them, look, we're buying too much nuclear stuff from the Chinese, right? We've got Bradwell and we've got Sizewell, our current nuclear plants under construction. We've gone to Chinese General Nuclear, their state-owned firm, and asked them for billions in investment. Now, that seems like a bit of a national security risk at a time where we're kind of in a Cold War with China. President Trump, for example, banned transformers in the American energy grid. I think having nuclear power plants on our shore, part owned by China, is not all that smart. So I said, why not let the energy companies do a feed-in tariff? You know, factor in over time the cost of building the plant into an energy bill. Now, bear in mind, we should be getting the energy bills from gas rather than renewables, which are so expensive that before inflation, I calculated it would be at least £3 trillion to try and make the UK fully renewable. But neither here nor there. Greg Hands, in partnership with then Business Minister Kwasi Kwarteng, wrote back to me and said, that sounds like a great idea. We'll put it in the Nuclear Financing Bill 2022. Now, those aren't going to be online for another decade, but it seems that at least he's listening to a more sensible energy policy. At least he wants to do North Sea drilling and fracking, unlike some of his predecessors.
And, of course, he looked quite comfortable on television today delivering his budget because he's been on University Challenge.
Yeah, he got in a bit of trouble for that a little while ago because he swore once or twice while on air, I suppose getting frustrated with his teammates. But he did seem quite cool, calm and collected today. I just hope his demeanour is quite a lot more consistent than he has been in the past. And I think something that will interest your viewers is quite a while ago, I know that there was some scrutiny over Liz Truss, Dominic Raab and obviously Kwarteng writing a book called Britain Unchained and saying that Britain's workers aren't as hardworking as the Chinese. Well, before that, he wrote a book called Ghosts of Empire. And I'm just going to read a quick quote here. He said, "Much of the instability in the world is a product of its legacy of individualism and haphazard policymaking from the British Empire." So he had a very critical view of Britain on the world stage. It says, "Far from being harbingers of liberal pluralism, the servants of empire were naturally at home with the idea of human inequality with notions of hierarchy and status." Now, from 2010, that sounds quite woke, doesn't it? I mean, of course, the British Empire didn't do all the best thing through the world. I mean, they had a prostitution ring, for example, that was set up in India, so that's not particularly palatable. But he seems to have, like, at least spoken to maybe Kemi Badenoch and changed his mind, because fairly recently he turned around and said, "Oh, we shouldn't be tearing down statues. We should actually be teaching the full 400 years of the empire and some of the good things it did around the world." So he's been a bit flip-floppy in the past. He's been a very well-educated man, a historian. He said, "Oh, some of the prime ministers from the last century, like Maggie Thatcher and Tony Blair, may have been successful, but they weren't very historically literate." I hope he brings that more historical perspective, something a bit more balanced than in 2010, to the role. And I hope he's as successful as Chancellor, as he was in University Challenge.
Definitely. The clock's against us, but let's bring in my panellist, Albi Amankona, because, Albi, you are an economic strategist, a political commentator. You are a Conservative supporter. You set up Conservatives Against Racism, and it's quite a moment for the country, for the government and for the Conservative Party to replace a Chancellor of Indian descent, of Asian descent, by a man of African descent, a black man in the Treasury, a moment to celebrate in this country.
I think what we should be celebrating, Mark, is whether or not he's actually any good at the job. I mean, he's released his budget today. We wish him well with that budget. It is a gamble. But I don't think we should necessarily just be self-congratulatory because we have a black chancellor or because we have an Asian chancellor or because we have a female prime minister. We have done all of those things as a country. Now I think it's time to start thinking about what's next, and what this government needs to do is deliver before the next general election.
Well said. Well, I'm delighted to say that Albi Amankona will stay with us, as will Hilary Freeman and Lizzie Cundy. They're my panel, reacting to the big stories of the day, including my big opinion monologue next, which is all about free speech under attack in this country. You won't believe the story I've got to tell you. My sincere thanks to the brilliant Connor Tomlinson. Thank you, Connor. Check out his brilliant talk show. It's Lotus Eaters. It's online. Quite the listen and quite the watch, let me tell you. So we've got my take at 10, the papers at 10:30, and also my Mark Meets guest in a few minutes' time, TV legend Timmy Mallet. Plus more on the budget. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio,
and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. My Mark Meets guest is children's TV legend Timmy Mallet. In the news agenda with my panel following today's tax-cutting budget, is Thatcherism back? And is that a good or a bad thing? And in my take at 10 in just 2 minutes' time, why free speech in this country is hanging by a thread. Be afraid, be very afraid. You won't want to miss my take at 10 in just a moment. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. A busy hour to come. First, the headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has hailed a new era for growth as he announced the largest series of tax cuts in half a century. As part of the government's mini-budget, Kwasi Kwarteng told the Commons he plans to abolish the 45% top rate of income tax for the highest earners. He also said he'll bring forward the planned basic rate reduction from 20 to 19 pence from April next year. The major spending package also includes cuts to stamp duty and the scrapping of the planned increase in corporation tax. The Chancellor says today's a good day for the UK.
We were facing a situation where the tax burden was at a 70-year high, and that was completely unacceptable. The Prime Minister campaigned for the leadership on the basis that we were going to reduce taxes, and that's exactly what we've done. The path we were on was simply unsustainable. We couldn't simply raise taxes indefinitely and hope that we would get prosperity. That's why this morning I reduced the tax burden across the piece, and I'm very, very committed to that.
Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the mini-budget is nothing new.
Can I thank the Chancellor on his comprehensive demolition of the record of the last 12 years. Their record, their failure, their vicious circle of stagnation. The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed.
In other news, a second teenager has been arrested after the fatal stabbing of a boy in West Yorkshire. 15-year-old Hari McLean was killed outside his school in Huddersfield on Wednesday. West Yorkshire police say a 15-year-old boy has been arrested in connection with the death. Yesterday, a 16-year-old was arrested on suspicion of murder. Both remain in custody. Russian-backed officials in 4 occupied regions of Ukraine are holding self-styled referendums on joining Russia. The so-called votes are taking place over the next 5 days in 4 regions across the south and east of the country, which represent around 15% of Ukrainian territory. The referendums have been denounced as illegitimate by Ukraine and the West. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's straight back to Mark.
Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Coming up, my Mark Meets guest is children's TV legend Timmy Mallet. We'll be talking kids' TV, being an unlikely celebrity, wacky glasses and having a #1 record. Timmy Mallet tells his incredible story shortly. In the news agenda with my panel following today's tax-cutting budget, is Thatcherism back? And if so, is that a good or a bad thing? Plus, we've got another topical game show based around the budget and tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30 sharp with full panel reaction. But first, my take at 10. Hoodie are now deciding what you should think. In what has been the worst week for free speech in some time, and after the last couple of years that's going some, US tech giant PayPal has effectively defunded and attempted to drive out of business the Free Speech Union, an organisation which offers legal support to anyone whose basic rights of expression have been threatened or their livelihood or career affected, plus the Daily Skeptic online newspaper, which simply publishes Office for National Statistics data and other peer-reviewed medical papers from around the world in relation to COVID and climate change. Here's their founder, Toby Young, talking to me on Wednesday when I sat in for the great Mark Stein.
When I called up and said, what's going on? What have I done? Tell me how I violated
your acceptable use policy. Give me an opportunity to correct whatever I've done wrong. No, we don't know exactly what you've done wrong. We're just shutting down your account. No right of appeal, no right to parole. You're just dead to us as far as we're concerned.
That video has since gone viral, and rightly so. Now, they are not the only ones. Others defunded with donations from the public, locked in a PayPal bank account for at least 180 days, are the Law or Fiction organisation, which has helped the public to understand their legal rights in the course of the pandemic and beyond, and Us for Them, a collective of concerned parents who spoke out against school closures, which most people now accept was a colossal mistake. And they questioned the vaccination of healthy children, apparently controversial, even though that was the view of the JCVI, the government's vaccine body. They said, don't vax healthy kids, but Chris Whitty overruled them. On the vaccines point, maybe PayPal should try to defund Denmark. Can you defund a country? After all, they've stopped all vaccinations in Denmark to anyone under 50. You need a serious underlying medical condition and a doctor's note to get the jab. Are they anti-vaxxers in Denmark? You tell me. Now, if we allow this American assault on British free speech from woke, brainwashed employees in Silicon Valley, then this will only get worse. The Americans can do what they like and crush free speech on their own shores. When I look at their disastrous president and their continued obsession with COVID, masking toddlers and vaccinating babies, or when I observe their top health chief, who now says you should get jabbed, wait for it, every 2 months. Here's the tweet. Welcome to hell. Then I'm starting to think that America has fallen. But it's not too late to save Britain. The best thing about this country is its liberal values of freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of action, freedom of thought. But the weaponization of money by the likes of PayPal is an attempt to destroy that. And what's the moral fig leaf they hide behind? Misinformation. Well, it's become blindingly obvious that whilst there is dangerous misinformation out there, a lot of so-called misinformation is really just shorthand for challenging the prescribed narrative, speaking truth to power, and horror of horrors, quoting actual statistics and data. Alex Berenson, a very talented journalist, was permanently banned by Twitter for simply quoting government statistics about the vaccine. A permanent ban. He sued them in court, he won, and they had to reinstate his account. All he was doing was publishing government data. You know what they say, stand up to bullies. Well, they chose the wrong enemy in that chap, Alex Berenson. They also chose the wrong enemy in Toby Young from the Free Speech Union and Daily Skeptic. They chose the wrong enemy in Molly Kingsley, an ordinary mum who's concerned about her kids and everyone's kids from Us for Them. They chose the wrong enemy in Stephen Jackson, the brilliant lawyer from Law or Fiction. And they've definitely chosen the wrong enemy in the brilliant comedian Jack Dee, who risked the wrath of his woke comedy buddies by tweeting the following. He wrote, "I'm in the process of cancelling my PayPal account. Big tech companies that feel they can bully people for questioning mainstream groupthink don't deserve anyone's business." A genius comedian and a hero to me all over again. If we don't protect freedom of speech in this country, if we don't rob the likes of PayPal from being able to dictate the national conversation here, it doesn't end well. And we've had a taste of this at GB News, with a few very high-profile public figures in the media who are trying to get GB News cancelled. Why? Because they want to stitch up the national conversation. They want to control the narrative. They want to tell you what to think, what to say, and what to do. Just remember how establishment media belittled, gaslit, and attacked anybody that didn't want to be locked down and would rather take their chances with the virus, people who wanted to get back to work and provide for their family. And what about those that felt they were healthy and fit enough not to need an experimental vaccine or, God forbid, wearing a mask? Unless we defend people's rights to free expression and debate the issues that affect everyone's daily lives in this country, then we've got no right saying we live in the free world. Free speech is non-negotiable, and we must fight for it. Hit PayPal and other heartless, brainless censors where it hurts, actions speak louder than words. How do we fight this attack on British shores? This is an attack on free speech, by the way, that comes from America, but how do we deal with it? Let me get a quick word from my panel before we meet Timmy Mallet. I'm delighted to have Hilary Freeman, Albie Amankona and Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, what are your thoughts about this? Organisations that are there just to disseminate some information to the public who have now been cancelled.
Yeah, awful. I've cancelled my PayPal, by the way, folks. Yeah, that's it. No, and it always is the woke brigade, I have to say, that are trying to stop us from speaking and what we feel. And just because you're offended doesn't make you right. And I'm really upset with these big tech. I agree, actually, with everything Jack D said on his Twitter. I'm very glad others are speaking out against them.
Yes, and you know the showbiz world inside out, Lizzie. It was a brave thing for Jack D to do. I mean, he's a very famous and wealthy man, but he'll have lost a few friends in the last few days for that tweet.
Well, possibly, because as we know, all of those in the comedy world or the showbiz world, as I say, are usually very sort of on the left side. And he probably will have ruffled a few feathers, but good for him. He's gone up in my estimation, I have to say.
Most certainly. And of course, Lizzie, what's interesting, the likes of Alex Berenson, this guy in America, he took Twitter to court. I mean, you know, they chose the wrong enemy there. They permanently suspended his account because he was simply publishing government data. He's gone back on that platform. So it's worth fighting this, isn't it?
It's totally worth fighting for, Mark, and I'm so glad he did that against Twitter. And it's also been done on YouTube. I mean, so many people have been stopped from saying how they feel and think, and that's why we love this show, Mark.
Well, look, that's it. It is all about opinions. Hilary, what are your thoughts about this? Particularly the likes of Us For Them, which is an organisation, non-profit, set up by concerned mums and dads, hardly far-right conspiracy theorists.
Absolutely. You know, I'd say I'm, you know, fairly left-wing, and I still believe in free speech. I think if something isn't actually inciting violence or harm on people, then there's absolutely no reason to take it down. And I think the problem is that whoever is monitoring and policing these companies and social media as well, and PayPal or whatever, they don't seem to have any kind of a brain in discriminating between different thoughts or different ideas. I think anything that's controversial, they just take down. Anything that they think might be, you know, not the mainstream view or the politically correct view, they just take down. And I think that's the issue. I think that somebody needs to sit down and say, like, what are people actually saying, and is this dangerous? And if not, then there's nothing wrong with debate.
I think that's exactly right. A chilling story, Albie.
Yes, I always find these stories to be quite concerning, especially when we see it happening in both private organisations, so companies like PayPal, companies like Twitter, for example, blocking the content of people, or the voice of people that they deem to be disagreeable. But then we also see it coming from the government. I mean, if we look at the Online Harms Bill, we've got the legal but harmful speech in there. I mean, what's that doing in there? So we do need to be a lot more careful about these things. But on the private organisation side of things, I always find myself a little bit torn, because part of me says, well, they're private businesses, and what business is it of mine to tell them what to do?
Well, indeed, and of course that's an important debate. Some would argue it's a sort of marketplace, it's a town square, and therefore needs to have different rules. Briefly, Albie, do you think the government will look closer at the online safety bill to prevent this curtailing of freedom of speech? Do you think it needs another look, that bill?
I would certainly like the bill to be looked at again, for sure. Kemi Badenoch was one of my favourite people in the leadership election, because of one of the reasons because of that was because she wanted to look at the Online Harms Bill, and particularly this provision for legal but harmful speech. So I do think it does need to be looked at by the new Culture Secretary, but it's not something we have heard anything about since Liz Truss took office a few weeks ago.
Brilliant stuff. My amazing panel are back at exactly 10:30 for a full paper review from 10:30 till 11. It's time now to meet a national treasure. Yes, indeed. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, showbiz, sport, business and beyond. Tonight, icon of British broadcasting, Timmy Mallet. Born in Cheshire, his media career started whilst he was a student at the University of Warwick, where he worked at the student radio station before moving on to BBC Radio Oxford and Piccadilly Radio in Manchester. He got a break in TV with a Saturday morning stint on TV AM, and his national treasure status was confirmed when he became a presenter of the Wide Awake Club with co-presenters Michaela Strachan and Tommy Boyd. The spin-off, Whack-A-Day, was another monster hit. And as well as the wacky glasses and outfit, Timmy was famous for the game Mallet's Mallet, in which contestants got clobbered over the head with a massive, oversized pink and yellow foam mallet. You had to be there. He's done stage shows, is a celebrated oil painter and acrylic artist. He's written a best-selling autobiography, and he's even had a UK #1 with his legendary cover of Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini.
2, 3, 4, tell the people what you want. It was an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini that she wore for the first time today. Oh, yeah. An itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini, so in the locker she wanted to stay. 2, 3, 4, stick around, we'll tell you more.
I miss 80s hair. TV legend Timmy Mallet, welcome to GB News.
Well, thank you, Mark, for that lovely introduction. It's great to be with you, and how lovely to hear Itsy Bitsy again. I will just bring you up on something there, actually, #1 around the world. Thank you very much. Not just Britain. So I'm absolutely delighted with that, and it's always lovely to hear that song. In fact, I hear it most days because it's the ringtone on my mobile.
Not that your ego's out of control,
Love
Timmy.
it. Love it.
It's actually a brilliant cover. You were already a star at that point. Did that take you up a level? Did that hit change your life, Timmy?
It certainly made a difference. I mean, you can't take away being #1. It's a joy to be reminded about the pleasure of Itsy Bitsy. And sometimes when I'm traveling, this is brought up. People are like, oh, it's the Itsy Bitsy man. I think it's funny. And, you know, I'm thrilled to bits to have had that opportunity and to have find that, you know, that song is in people's consciousness and it brings a smile wherever I go. So, hey, that's pretty good, isn't it, to be able to bring a smile?
Well, definitely. Sort of comedic presenter, entertainment host, more or less an actor, author, singer. You're nothing if not versatile.
Well, I'm into cycling a bit as well, actually, Mark. And I've just completed a circumnavigation of Britain. I set off in March from Paddington Station, actually, just around the corner from the studios. And pedalled down the Thames, and when I got to Dartford, I took a right and went down to Rochester and around the coast of Kent. Then all the way along the south coast till I got to Land's End, turn a corner, up the west coast, and when I got to the big bridge into Wales, I turned another corner there and went right out and up and all over those hills of southwest Wales and around the coastline till I got back into England again and up to the Solway Firth. And then it's the great, wonderful expanse of the Highlands of Scotland and all the way along that north coast until I got to John O'Groats. And then there's this lovely feeling if you turn that corner and you're heading southwards. And all the way along that, Mark, I took with me my paints so that I was creating watercolours and acrylic paintings as I went along the way. So I've got a little test for you here, Mark. Where was I when I painted this?
Well, that looks like a castle in the Highlands of Scotland.
Well, it is a castle. I'm glad you recognise that it's a castle, but clearly your geography is absolutely pants because everybody knows that this is the great castle of Harlech in Wales. And I was following the footsteps here of Joseph Turner, the great 19th century artist, who travelled around Britain painting great vistas. This is because he couldn't travel to Europe at the time. Napoleon had a lot to answer for. But the thing here is that you can stand within 6 feet of where he stood and see his image and paint that. So that's Harlech. Where was I when I painted this, Mark?
OK, let's have a look at full frame on that. Let's lose the strap. I think... OK, well, that must be near Dover. I'm spotting some...
You're just saying that because you see white cliffs. OK, it is the south coast, but you need to go along a few hundred miles and you'll find this.
Are we in
Isle
Kent?
of Wight, the Needles.
Oh, that's
Got it?
wonderful.
OK, here's another one. You will know this. I know you'll know this one. Where am I here?
Oh, that is...
Everybody's shouting at the telly now, Mark. Come on.
Game of Thrones. Of course. How could I forget?
It's St. Michael's Mount. It's one of the great iconic places of the country. And as I say, my favourite artists have visited this over the time. And I took with me my acrylics and painted this on the site. And the exciting thing here was waiting while the tide was coming in or going out. I'm not entirely sure, because when the tide went out, then I was able to cross to St. Michael's Mount. And when I got there, there's a fella at the other side. He said, "Oh, hello, Timmy. Last time I saw you a couple of years ago, you were on my little trailer. We had to drag you across because you got stuck in the mud." I'm saying, hang on, the only other time I've been here was on a Wackaday filming trip in 1989. He said, "Yeah, that's right, a couple of years ago." I love the fact that he was the same bloke, and there he was still working at St. Michael's Mount. And I find this every day when I'm on my travels, that people will come up and say, "Hey, do you remember?" And the chances are I will do. I'll remember the day and the occasion. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have these paintings as a memory of my journey, and I'm sharing them on my socials, on Twitter, on Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Strava. And I talk about my love of art and love of history, and of course my memoirs from Wackaday, Mallet and Itsy Bitsy, in my story of cycling the Camino de Santiago. This is in Utterly Brilliant, My Life's Journey. And I've got some of the paintings in there. And this is a journey I undertook from home. Cycling. It's one of the great pilgrimage routes of the world, to Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. And traditionally, you would set off from home and make your way somehow or other to Spain and then back again. I decided to go by bike, and I thought this will be fun. I didn't count on having the beast from the east and torrential storms, which added to the challenge. But, weather's weather. And the point is that what happens is it's the people you meet along the way, Mark, who make it for you, because they remind you that the world is full of people who are basically good and nice. And if you turn up with a smile and, show your best side, you're going to get kindness in return. And that act of random kindness is something that I am a big believer in. Big believer in reaching our potential. We don't have to be the best in the world at what we do, just the best that we can possibly be ourselves. And this has been my feeling, really, with all the work I've done through my career in radio and telly, acting on stage, having a #1 record, and now cycling all the way around the coast of Britain. It's 4,730 miles I did. All I can think of is I just went too fast, Mark. I just went too quickly.
Well, I'm
should have gone slower.
I'm sure it did.
But it's a stop at every opportunity and get the paints out to capture that particular moment. One of the things I'm a big believer in is not pre-booking. So I go on my own without a backup team, and I don't pre-book the accommodation, because if you do, it means you're always trying to get there as opposed to being here. It's the here and now of living that is so crucial to making the most of each and every day.
Well, I think that's
how
brilliant.
I'm feeling with the things I've been doing throughout my career, and the TV shows, the touring, the journey of my life. That's the feeling.
Sure. Well, look, you're a very talented, fine artist. I can direct my viewers to your impressive website. It's called malletspalette.co.uk. You're an incredibly talented
Mark,
artist.
who would have thought of a name like that for a website? Mallet's Palette. And you'll see some of the art that I've been doing on my journeys. And do let me know what you think about it.
Timmy.
In fact, one of the things I did recently, you'll love this story, Mark. I was on a canal boat. Your pal mentioned this to me the other day. He said he's been loving my TikTok videos because there's a video on there that's had 500,000 views of me filling up the canal boat with a hose pipe, just putting the water into the water tank. And it took 2 hours. And I'm thinking, why is it taking 2 hours? I don't have that long a shower. And then I realised there's an overflow and I'm filling up the ruddy canal. Filling up the canal with a hose pipe.
Timmy.
Must be nuts.
I love it. I love it. Timmy, you know about live telly. I've got about 60 seconds left. Can we go rapid fire because you've had an incredible career? First of all, did you anticipate your success when you started on Wide Awake Club and then Whack-A-Day? Did you know it would go so big because you were one of the biggest stars in the country at that time?
Oh, that's very kind of you to say, Mark. It's a kind and generous thing for you to say. And the answer is, of course, no, you have no idea of things like that. And in fact, it's not really that relevant. It's, the point is that when Whack-A-Day was on the telly, there wasn't an awful lot of other options. And we weren't used to watching telly in the mornings. So hang on, youngsters, families, watch the TV together, and it became a family thing. And I love the fact that it's so keen in people's memory, and people enjoy the fondness of thinking back to their childhood. And it's I'm blessed to be able to say, yeah, that was the show that I was involved with, and I'm really proud of it. But I don't think about it each and every day. I still got the mallet. Fat little Pinky Punky's right behind me over here. You can probably see him just over my shoulder.
Yes, there it is.
And he's doing really rather nicely.
Listen, a privilege to have you on the show. An incredible broadcasting legend, Timmy. You've done it all, and the story continues. You've got your bike, you've got your paints, so do check out Timmy's socials. His website for his work, his artwork is malletspalette.co.uk. But as he said, he's on TikTok. He's on YouTube. He's everywhere. Timmy, come and see us again soon. In fact, come on your bike next time you're in the area.
Do you cycle yourself, Mark?
I tend to take taxis, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, in that case, get yourself a bike, and I'll take you for a little cycle ride, and we'll go up the canal, and I'll show you there's a lovely route just along the canal from your studios, and we'll have a little pedal, and then we'll go and get a cuppa at the end of it. How about that?
I look forward to it. I look forward to it. TV legend Timmy Mallet. Timmy, thank you so much for joining us. His book's out now, by the way. It's a cracking read. Lots more to come. Next up, The Papers with full panel reaction. Don't go anywhere. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I hope you enjoyed Mark Meets Timmy Mallet, or as I'm calling it, Timmy Mallet Meets Mark. Right, brilliant stuff. Let's now get to the papers. It's exactly 10:30. As always at this time, we bring you the headlines, hot off the press. So, Sebastian, where shall we start? OK, let's go for the I newspaper, their weekend edition, and they're leading with pound plunges after Kwarteng bets UK economy on tax cuts. Sterling falls below $1.09 for the first time since 1985 as markets take fright at huge surge in borrowing to pay for the biggest tax cuts since 1972 and new spending. Punishing early verdict on Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's dash for growth. Cost of government borrowing rose by the most in a single day for a decade. Speculation about emergency interest rate rise to mend UK's battered credibility. OK, The Times next. And the royal rift, Harry, Meghan and the palace insiders who really know what happened. Exclusive extracts from Valentine Lowe's new book about the royals. Truss's great tax gamble, biggest cuts package for 50 years. Boost for higher earners. Sterling falls amid borrowing fears. And Dame Hilary Mantel, celebrated author. She won the Booker Prize twice. She was the author of the Wolf Hall trilogy, and she sadly passed away after a stroke. Telegraph, Kwarteng gambles on biggest tax cuts in half a century. Chancellor sets out a £45 billion package to stave off recession, but pound slumps, and economists call it a leap of faith. Alistair Heath, writing for The Telegraph, says Britain back at its boldest. This revolutionary budget adds up to the greatest I've ever seen. There you go, Alistair Heath. Let me give you a bit more detail on this. He is a good writer, and he says this was the best budget I've ever heard a British Chancellor deliver by a massive margin. The tax cuts were so huge and bold, the language so extraordinary, that at times, listening to Kwasi Kwarteng, I had to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming, that I hadn't been transported to a distant land that actually believed in the economics of Milton Friedman and F.A. Hayek. OK, and also down to business. The King Charles, attends to his papers sitting behind an antique French mahogany writing desk in the 18th century room at Buckingham Palace. There you go. The King back at work. What a heartening image that is after such a sad couple of weeks. The Daily Mail now, and we've got, at last, a true Tory budget. Kwasi Kwarteng launched a £45 billion dash for growth with the biggest tax cuts in half a century. Getting the thumbs up there, perhaps predictably, from the Mail, but not so much from The Guardian, who say a budget for the rich. Kwasi Kwarteng has been accused of delivering a reckless mini-budget for the rich after his tax-cutting package sent the pound crashing to its lowest level against the dollar in 37 years. Super rich laughing all the way to the actual bank, say The Telegraph. Jonathan Freeland writing in The Telegraph, the Tories have made a declaration of class war. OK, that's The Guardian. Where shall we go next? Sebastian, we've had The Guardian. I mean, you can't get the staff these days. He's not even been to the pub. I'm not sure what his excuse is. I think he's just having a fallow year. Let's go to the Express. You know what it is? He's a lefty. He loves The Guardian. He wants me to stay on The Guardian. You know, we're a very broad church here at GB News. The Daily Express. We've got the courage to bet big on Britain. Coming out fighting Kwasi Kwarteng last night stood by his huge tax cuts budget, saying that he will never apologise for having the courage to bet big on our incredible country. Also in the Express, how Harry and Meghan really fell out with palace aides. And Wolf Hall author Hilary Mantel dies of massive stroke in her 70s. Very sad story. OK, The Star next, a very, very serious story. Mendy trial. Grealish, allegedly, Jack Grealish, slept with woman on same night she was raped. This is a shocking story and a very, very hard headline to read. England footballer Jack Grealish had sex with a woman on the same night she was allegedly raped by a friend of fellow Man City star Benjamin Mendy. A court was told. The case continues. The player there not linked to any crimes, but just named in relation to that alleged incident. Also not amused, breeders charging £6,000 for Queen's favourite dogs. There you go, a little bit of a frenzy to get hold of the corgis. All right, Sebastian, do you want to go back to The Guardian again? Should we go back to The Guardian? For some more brainwashing of my lovely audience? Oh, bloody hell. I'm being heckled now by my team.
That's funny.
Well, look, let's kick off with The Guardian, Albie, because they're not happy. And to be fair to The Guardian and Director Sebastian, this budget it's won the support of, I guess, the right within the Tory party, but it's great news for left-leaning headline writers, isn't it?
It is certainly great news for left-leaning headline writers, if you will. But I'm not sure if actually the right-wing papers have actually got the tone of this right, or indeed the left-wing papers have got the tone of this right. Because I think if you were to read The Guardian, you'd think it was a budget for the rich, not a budget for growth, which is what it's about.
Yeah.
And if you were to read the right-wing papers, you would be thinking it was the best thing since sliced bread. And actually, it is increasing public spending hugely. OK, fine, we're using public money and debt to pay for tax cuts, but we are still increasing the national debt at a time when debt interest is going up. So it's a high-risk strategy. The payoff could be huge, but I'm just not really sure any of the papers have quite got the tone right, maybe with the exception of The Times, who have called it Truss's great tax gamble.
Well, yes, and it's a political gamble, isn't it, Hilary? Because this echoes what you said earlier in the show in response to my big opinion monologue that this won't help the poorest and it will help the rich.
No, and I think, it's all very well saying that a budget isn't just about helping poor people, but I don't see how you can say that, one of the richest countries in the world, how you can say we've got a successful economy or that we're helping to create a successful economy when there's people who have jobs who are going to food banks. There's something very, very wrong and going on in the economy of this country, that people who are working and cannot afford to heat their homes and cannot afford to eat. And it's all very well giving them money, but, that's just... the budget has to help everybody. You can't just help the rich.
Well, let's have the view now of Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves in the House of Commons responding to Kwasi Kwarteng's budget. Take a look at this.
The Chancellor has confirmed that the costs of the energy price cap will be funded by borrowing, leaving the eye-watering windfall profits of the energy giants untaxed. The oil and gas producers will be toasting the Chancellor in the boardrooms as we speak, while working people are left to pick up the bill. Borrowing higher than it needs to be, just as interest rates rise. And yet the Chancellor refuses to allow independent economic forecasts to be published, which would show the impact of this borrowing on our public finances, on growth and on inflation. It is a budget without figures, a menu without prices. Speaker, what has the Chancellor got to hide?
There you go. Well, Lizzie Cundy, Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is not having this budget. International currency speculators are not having it. Half of the press are not having it. But I think the die is cast, and Truss and Kwarteng are going to have to hold their nerve.
Well, they are, indeed. And it is a gamble. We all admit it's a gamble. But as Hilary was saying, the world isn't the same. No, it isn't the same. Because sadly, Tony Blair, back in the day, took us to war on a lie, cost us in blood and treasure over 8.4 billion. Then, let's not forget that. And don't forget, we have a war in the Ukraine. We've had a pandemic, a lockdown crisis, I would say, which wasn't correct to do, in my words. So a lot of things have gone on, and both government, their long-term decisions have been awful, and they haven't planned on both sides, Labour as well as Tory, with the energy crisis. But I have to say, I look at this, I explained it to my boy, as a cake, and we have to have this cake grow, and we have to then, once it's grown, we divide it out and slice it out. But if we have no cake, what have we got?
And what we don't want to do is borrow sugar.
Exactly, indeed, Mark. So we have to.
What about a soggy bottom?
Well, I never like a soggy bottom.
Where's
you know
Mary Berry? Mary Berry for Chancellor. Hillary, you were about to say something sensible.
Who is going to pay? Who's going to pay for this? You know, it's going to be.
But
the
it's
next
an emergency.
generation,
But
isn't it?
can I just
And-
say, we've only just paid off this. Well, we paid off the Second World War in 2007. I mean, this is emergency budget, and we need it. I mean, look at the crisis we're in. We've been in a crisis before, but if we all, pay people on the same level as inflation, we'll have a depression.
I mean,
so we
Hillary,
can't do that.
doesn't growing the economy fix everything?
Well, in an idealistic world, it does, yes. But then you've got to share it out, haven't you? I mean, this is probably a very unpopular view, but I believe that there should be universal basic income. And I think that would solve a hell of a lot of issues. It would make the system a lot more simple and fairer. And it would also encourage people to work and it would encourage creativity and all kinds of other things.
Hillary, on the fundamental principle of this budget and indeed of Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister, that we need to grow the economy, is there any disagreement that you have there? Is it on the methods of growing the economy that you disagree with, rather than that the growth is needed?
I don't think that the economy should stagnate, but I think, I disagreed, as you know, with Brexit.
Yeah.
I don't think that's helped grow the economy. I think it's shrunk the economy.
But on universal basic income, that would be obviously a very expensive policy. It's essentially a huge expansion of universal credit. And how exactly would you pay for that?
Well, you would, for instance, you've got the £12,500, I think that's the limit now, that you don't pay tax on. So rather than having that, you just give people that, let's say you give people £1,000 a month, anything else that you earn, you then pay tax on.
But Hillary, we've got to encourage work, and this
But that
makes
doesn't
work
encourage-
attractive because people are going to have more money in their pockets, aren't they? And then they can spend, and then they're going to stimulate the economy. Yes, they are, because we've got tax cuts.
Well, do you know how much people on low incomes, people earning about 20,000, are going to gain by these tax cuts?
Yeah, but
about 150 quid a year.
But Hillary, you've got to look at it, that those that need it most will be getting extra help from universal credit and other areas. We have to stimulate the economy.
Their energy bills support as well, of course. And don't forget, I mean, it was Labour who were up in arms about this increase in national insurance because of the impact it would have on the poorest in our society. Well, that decision has been reversed. So
Sure, but they should never have been made in the first place. However,
remember Gordon Brown, nothing in the coffers. Do you remember when he wrote that little note?
That's right. Sorry, there's no money left.
I was so sorry. There's no money left. So
But if you look at countries like Sweden, people pay much higher taxes, but they don't have the problems that we've got. And I think if people in this country don't seem to want to, they seem to be more selfish and don't want to pay higher taxes, so that everybody gets the fair share and isn't in poverty.
What about this idea, though, that if taxes for the super rich are lower, you attract more wealthy people to come here, which means that they spend their money here, they pay their taxes here, and they probably invest here too. I mean, what's the VAT on a brand new Rolls-Royce? Probably 40 or 50 grand. So if somebody buys a Rolls-Royce in London or Manchester rather than Paris or Dubai, surely that's a plus point for us.
Well, yes, but then you also end up with a situation like we've got with Russians and Chinese owning half of London, and London becomes a country just for rich foreigners. And England becomes it's not. Is that a good thing for the country? I don't think it is.
I'm certainly concerned about overseas investors buying up enormous amounts of property in our
and
great
leaving it
cities.
empty.
And leaving it empty is not great. Albie, I mean, the economy is your area of expertise.
Look, ultimately, the economy needs to grow. We've had a stagnant economy now since the financial crisis of 2008, and it's clear to me, and indeed clear to many people, that something drastic needs to change in how the economy is run. Whether or not Liz Truss's plan is the right plan is yet to be seen.
Yeah.
But it was clear that in order to win the next general election, the Conservatives needed to break from what they were doing currently, and that's exactly what we've seen.
Well, we needed radical change. We needed something radical doing. And she has taken the bull by the horns and gone for it. And I have to say, she's been bold and she has delivered, like she said she would say.
Has she been...
We've had to take that risk.
I guess the argument would be from some Conservatives is, has she gone too bold too quickly? I think a lot of us would have been happy with the national insurance rise being cancelled and the corporation tax rise being cancelled. This extra stuff, the 45% rate on the extra tax for the wealthiest people in society, the bringing forward of the 1% cut in income tax to next year, as opposed to 2024, wasn't necessarily necessary. Now, if it translates into faster growth quicker, great, but the optics of the 45p income tax cut, it's not the best at the moment, I would say. And this is a Conservative speaking. And from people who might have been supporters of Rishi Sunak, they might be saying, is this a fiscally Conservative budget? No, it's not, because we are increasing national debt.
You see, I don't understand why they didn't just do the fuel duty, reduce it by 25p. That would instantly put down inflation, wouldn't it?
Well, that's right, and I've had viewers complaining. You're very perceptive there, Lizzie, that viewers saying, why didn't that cut come? It's something that Liz Truss promised during the campaign. Well, we're very excited because after this very short break, we're going to talk about whether Thatcherism is back. Take a look at this image, which is a photoshopped image of Liz Truss as Margaret Thatcher. If you load that up, I'm going to just explain it because we'll cover it after the break. But obviously it is a tax-cutting budget and therefore it's very Thatcherite. So we'll be debating after the break, is Thatcher back? We'll discuss that with my panel and leading businessman, entrepreneur and former politician Lance Foreman, and you will love to see that image. I'll show it to you after the break. So is Thatcherism back? Plus another game as well. See you shortly.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
On radio,
and online. We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Listen, you don't pull your punches on email. I love getting your emails. It's the best bit of my show. And this is from Clive, who says, and by the way, folks, strap yourselves in for this one. Clive's coming in hot tonight. Clive said, "Dear Mark, a lot of people going to food banks are still sat on their butts, smoking, drinking and going to the bookies every day. Get them back to work." Clive there not pulling his punches on that one. And another one that says Albie talks a lot of sense. So who could disagree with that? Look, I'd love to get through more of your emails. It's been such a busy show. But let's get on to this, more from the papers, and another news-based game show. Having announced the biggest raft of tax cuts in over 50 years, we examine whether this is something straight out of the Thatcher playbook. Is Thatcherism back? Well, one man who thinks it may be making a comeback is the former London MEP, food entrepreneur, broadcaster and legend Lance Foreman. Check out what Lance tweeted earlier today. He tweeted this. He said, "It's coming home, it's coming home. Thatcher's coming home," with a photoshopped mock-up of Liz Truss with Margaret Thatcher's hairdo. I'm delighted to say the very hirsute Lance Foreman joins us now. Hi, Lance.
Hello, Mark. Good evening.
Is Thatcherism back? Did we witness it today?
You know what? I think we did. I think we saw a new Mrs. T in number 10, and I'm really very excited about what we heard today. And the thing about Thatcher, put aside, what she actually believed in, low taxes, small state, aspiration, put that aside. One of the key things about Margaret Thatcher was that she was a real leader. She had a driving philosophy which she explained to people, and that's how she drove her policy. She wasn't a focus group prime minister, and that's pretty much what we've had ever since the day Thatcher left office. And, going out and seeing what people think is best is not leadership at all. Leadership is having a view, convincing people it's the right way ahead, and actually following that philosophy. And that is exactly what Liz Truss has done today, and Kwasi Kwarteng. The most Thatcherite thing I think they did in the budget was reducing the 45% tax rate to 40%, because it was, even under Blair, it was 40%. It was Gordon Brown in his last days in office that pushed it up to 50, knowing that it would be quite tricky optically for the Tories to drop it. And George Osborne didn't have the balls to do it. He dropped it halfway to 45%. Finally, now, Liz Truss has just grabbed it and said, no, we're going to get it back to 40%.
And Lance, we've seen in the past certain taxes, particularly corporation tax, being cut but bringing in more money. So taxation is a bit of a dark art, isn't it? There's an alchemy to it, and it's sometimes counterintuitive.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, every time we brought corporation tax rates down under the Osborne chancellorship, we saw corporation tax revenues rise. And that's because, you're basically taxing investments with corporation tax. I personally think we would do far better as an economy if we completely scrapped corporation tax. The IEA have written papers on this. There are other ways of taxing. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to with Liz Truss, actually, because what we've had over the last 30 years is we've had chancellors tinkering around, we'll adjust a percent here or a percent there. And they've literally tinkered around with policy rather than actually stepped outside and reevaluated everything, real blue sky thinking. And I think that we have a prime minister and a chancellor now that, they don't have that long. They've only got 2 years before the next election. But I think that they are minded to review everything, simplify everything, which also is going to help. And what we saw today is just the start of this. I'm really excited.
Lance, great to have you on the show. Wish we had longer. Do come and see us in the studio soon. Former London MEP, the owner and co-founder of Foreman and Field, who are luxury food outlets, and they do all sorts of amazing deli items and hampers and all the rest of it. Brilliant stuff. Thanks to Lance Foreman. Well, look, it's time for our topical game show. And what I've asked you at home and our panel to do is to work out how much Brits spend on certain items every year. That's right, it's a budget-themed game. So what's in your basket is the name of the game. That sounds obscene, and Lizzie, I'd like to apologise.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll take your apology.
It's a question I never asked you before, although I've speculated. Elizabeth and Albie and Hillary, how much do Brits spend on average on booze? Individual Brits per year, how much do we spend on booze?
God.
Is it? Do you want me to give you a clue?
Yeah.
700, 900 or 1100?
900.
Yes, it is. It's 900 pounds.
I was going to say more. Sorry.
And double that for Lizzie. How much do we spend on tea bags per year?
Oh, I love a cup of tea.
Depends if you get those discount boxes, doesn't it? With the
Twinings
extra
is
bag.
quite expensive. PG tips.
£10, £12.50 or 15 quid?
15.
It is 15. Well done. How much do we spend on bread? Although I must say I went low carb, so it's almost nothing. But how much do you think Brits spend on bread per year?
Well, if you get it from Gales, about £500.
Yeah, 500 per loaf.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 quid?
No, 200.
I'd love to go where you go for your bread. 326. Underwear. How much we spend on undies? Lizzie, £8 million.
I don't wear any. There you
Drinks
go.
are on you.
Yeah, exactly. Undies.
It is an average person, £100. What about loo roll? How much? You'll be surprised how much we spend on bog roll.
But you see, it depends. Quilted.
Well, I'm sure yours is double reinforced.
We have to get the cheapest stuff going because otherwise it won't flush down the boat toilet.
I make my family use the rice paper stuff from school.
Maybe £600.
It is £274. There you go. But let me tell you that my panel are priceless, as was your company tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 9, so do join us and stick around because I'm doing headliners. See you in 2.
Good evening. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather outlook from the Met Office. A dry and a bright weekend for most places. Bit of rain across the southeast at the moment, only slowly clearing. 1 or 2 showers around, and the mornings will be fairly chilly, but this area of high pressure is slowly moving in. It's yet to really get rid of this wiggling weather fronts, which has made for quite a wet day across the far southeast, and that rain may linger across parts of Kent and Sussex through the night and into Saturday. There is a Met Office yellow warning in place. Away from the far southeast, though, just 1 or 2 showers, North Wales, eastern parts of England and southeast Scotland, but for most it's a dry night and with clear skies.